I grew up on Long Island, New York, which, if anybody doesn't know, Long Island is technically not a borough of New York, of Manhattan, but it's connected to the five boroughs of Manhattan, and it's its own place. It's its own. It's an island, and it's an island for a reason. It's its own place. So I was asked to become a tattooer and apprentice for a local shop on the North Shore of Long Island back in 1992, I believe it was. And I turned it down for about a year before I eventually took the apprenticeship. And after having taken the apprenticeship, because I had no real interest to become a tattooer, I had one or two small tattoos, which I did as a goof. A bunch of friends got together for another friend's birthday, and we all went out and got tattooed. And the fella who worked in the shop recognized my art and hired me to do some work on the side, and eventually up and asked me if I would apprentice in his tattoo shop. So it took me about a year to say yes, but eventually I said yes. And in 1993, in the winter of 1993, I officially started tattooing in Center Ridge, New York, on Long Island. So, and I've been tattooing professionally since 1993.
Your very first tattoos, they were inspired by your clients, or you were offering models?
So when you first start tattooing, especially back in the 90s, it wasn't so much about art. It was more about tattooing. And I know that sounds stupid because tattooing and art they kind of go hand in hand, but the art of tattooing didn't really become a thing probably until like the mid to late 90s, where you had more artists, like straight up artists getting into the industry versus people who just wanted a tattoo, or ex-bikers, or guys who were in high school who were good at drawing. You had actual artists, people who went to school and learned how to paint, learned how to become inkers or comic book artists or any number of things, getting into tattooing. And that probably started happening like late 90s, early 2000s. So in the beginning, it wasn't so much about creating your own art. It was more about just creating tattoos, like taking art from the walls of a tattoo shop and reproducing them on clients who walked into a shop and just picked something off the wall, and then we did that. I'd say I was very fortunate because I was an artist and because I drew a lot before I started tattooing. I really enjoyed doing pinup art. I was infatuated with 1940s, 1950s, old school pinups like Gil Elverin, George Petty, Alberto Vargas. So I love that kind of stuff, and I was able to transfer that to skin, and that's kind of what made my name, is because a couple of magazines came out. They published these very bright, full-color pinup artwork that I had reproduced and then created on my own, and at that time, very few people were doing that in tattooing, so it just kind of blew up. Like, it was something that nobody had seen, or only a handful of people had seen, and because of the magazines, it just helped really push me forward in a very short period of time. So where now an artist may work a few years, to really make a name for himself, I was very fortunate. Within 2 years, I had a very good name. I had a lot of magazine coverage, and because it was magazine coverage versus social media of today, back in the early 90s and the mid 90s, if you had 4 pages in one tattoo magazine that was only seen every 3 months, that was huge. Now, if you have 1 million photos on social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, it's in and out. It's fast. If you don't make an impact immediately, people just don't care. It passes people by. So I was very fortunate that I made a name for myself in our trade early in the 90s versus in the late 2000s. You know what I mean? 2010, 2020. I'd already made a name for myself by that point.
Let's talk about the palette that you used in those days.
So again, one of the things that set me apart from a lot of the tattooers of that time, of the mid 90s, was the fact that I was a painter. Like, I wasn't a painter, I was an airbrush artist. And there's a difference. Like, I mean, I wasn't an oil painter. I didn't paint in acrylics traditionally with a paintbrush. I painted with an airbrush. And airbrushing in the 90s was kind of a cutting edge. It was a cutting edge commercial tool, a medium. Like, it wasn't like oil painting. It wasn't like traditional acrylic painting. It was something that was a little bit set apart. I can paint on denim jackets. I can paint on the hood of a car. I could paint on, a canvas. You could paint on any number of things. And it was seen by so many different cultures. It wasn't just fine artists that were seeing it. It wasn't just highbrow art. It was lowbrow. And this is before lowbrow was a thing. It was lowbrow art. It was highbrow art. It was street art. It was so many different things. And the color palette we used back then was very bright colors, pinks, yellows, deep reds. Like, it was a different palette to what was used to being in the tattoo community, in the tattoo industry, where back then it was muted greens and blues and a bright yellow and a red. I mean, back in the day, you had a very limited palette in tattooing. It was blue, green, yellow, red. You know what I mean? And then if you could mix those in between, then you did that. When we came on the scene, we ignored everything that came before us, and we took what we knew from street art, from fine art, from commercial art, and we brought that to tattooing. And that's another aspect of tattooing that really set us apart, because nobody had seen this kind of stuff before. You were so used to seeing very traditional biker, very traditional Americana, or very traditional Japanese style tattooing, which has a very strict way in which things are done. Me, as a young tattooer who didn't have an uber traditional apprenticeship, we ignored all that stuff and we just did what we knew. We just brought to the table what we were familiar with that nobody else had seen. So it really just catapulted us to the forefront, and people just turned their heads and said, I want that. That's what I want to get tattooed.
It's interesting to see how tattooing evolved in a very positive way. As you said, it was appealing only to bikers or younger population. But now we can see tattoos on a mom, she has a little butterfly. And so it became part of our life.
Yes, I think, back in the day, before you were talking about the healing aspect of tattooing, and that's always been prevalent. And I've never really, back in the day, I recognized it when, let's say somebody comes in who was a drug addict, or somebody who had a drinking problem, and now they're sober. They no longer do drugs, they no longer drink, but they still have that core want of something, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be gambling, whether it be women, whatever. They have that. But when they have to get away from it, they need to fill it. So believe it or not, back in the early days when I first started tattooing, a lot of the people I tattooed a lot on a regular basis, like a weekly basis, were ex-drug addicts, were ex-alcoholics, were ex-addicts in one way, shape, or form or another. And to them, this was a safer, healthier way to kind of get that fix without actually endangering themselves or endangering others. So back in the day, a lot of my clients were ex-alcoholics or ex-drug addicts who basically were looking to fill that niche that they walked away from for health reasons. You know what I mean? It wasn't until many years later where you started getting, say, soccer moms, for lack of a better word, soccer moms, or a teacher and her, she's the cutting edge of teachers who got the tattoo that nobody, only a handful of her students knew about. You know what I mean? Then you started getting this younger, not even younger generation, but like probably like mid-30s generation of women, and even and fathers and stuff that were kind of looking to kind of break the mold of what it was to be a traditional parent, what it was to be a traditional 30, 40-year-old who had two kids, who had to take their kids to soccer practice and everything else. So back then, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. Now it's like nobody cares. Like, people act like it's not a big deal that they get their face tattooed or their hands tattooed or their fingers tattooed. I don't agree with that. I'm going to be 54 years old. I'm still a bit of an old world person when it comes to getting heavily tattooed. But by the same token, I do understand the importance of wanting to do something that really leaves a mark, that really leaves an impressionable mark on the person for themselves personally and for the people that are looking at them personally. I mean, look at the amount of facial tattoos you see now, the amount of hand tattoos, finger tattoos. The reason why people do that is because everybody knows you're tattooed. Everybody knows your story the moment they look at you. I personally don't necessarily think that's a great thing. I think that some people jump into it faster than they should. But I do understand that, yeah, man, that's how people think. They want to get something that everybody sees like that. Second you see them, you know that they're marked for life, and you feel the need to either ask the question as to why they did what they did to themselves, or it's obvious on their face. You know what I mean?
Your clients, what were their motivations for getting a tattoo?
So back in the day, it was more about just getting a mark. You know what I mean? It was something. If you left work early one day and you decided, I want to do something different, I'm going to get tattooed. And back then, it wasn't so much about like a theme or a reason. It was more about just getting a mark. You know what I mean? Like, I want to do something for me that nobody can take away. So you would go to a tattoo shop and you would look at the artwork on the walls, which, by the way, we call tattoo flash. All the artwork on the walls of a tattoo shop that you would walk into a tattoo shop and pick something off, that's called tattoo flash. So back in the day, people were inclined to do that versus coming up with their own ideas or finding something outside of the tattoo shop. They wanted more to just go in and pick something off the wall just to get something then and there. Because the idea is not so much a matter of making a personal statement. It was more at that point about just getting the mark, just getting something that everybody can see or that you can see and enjoy. You know what I mean? Whether it be a mom tattoo and that's more personable. If you got a mom tattoo or a dad tattoo or whatever, versus just getting an eagle or getting a little devil or whatever. It was more about just getting the mark. I'd say probably in the late 90s, especially with the influx of tattoo television, like Miami Ink say. Miami Ink was probably one of the first ones that really focused on, people are getting tattooed because they had a trauma in their life, or they had an obstacle in their life that they overcame, or they had some kind of goal that they finally met, and this is how they were going to meet that. This is how they were going to congratulate themselves. This is how they're going to reward themselves by getting this tattoo. So Miami Ink really, and again, this is the beginning of social media. This is the beginning of tattoo television. This is where it's not just a matter of tattoo magazines, which you have to go out of your way to see, or taking the step, having the guts to walk into a tattoo shop, which at that time, back in the day, was mainly biker run or was always kind of an off-putting kind of place. A very, very nerve-wracking kind of place to walk into. You walk in and you don't know how to react. You don't know how to act. You don't know if the person behind the counter is going to be polite or rude. And again, my generation of coming in, we were polite. We were happy to see clients coming in. We were happy when a school teacher came in for the first time versus some biker guy. Because now we get some different interaction with somebody. You have a different conversation with somebody. It's not just this outlaw, persona you're dealing with. You're dealing with a regular person. And that's where I'd say like the mid to late 90s where things started to change dramatically. And then when it got on TV and then social media, Instagram, Facebook, back then MySpace, things just got out of hand. So everybody got tattooed. And everybody felt that the reason why they were doing it was for something. Oh, I lost a child. I lost my brother. I lost my sister. I lost my mother. I lost my father. These were always things that were prevalent in the 90s and the 80s. But it wasn't until Tattoo TV came in and social media where it became, this is how I'm going to express myself. Which, in all honesty, not to take anything away from anybody I've ever tattooed or anybody who wants to get tattooed because of that, it kind of cheapened it a little bit because people stopped thinking for themselves and just assumed it was okay because now it's on TV. And again, I understand that it changed everything. Now everybody's tattooed, from your Starbucks barista to your school teachers to your bus drivers to whatever. They're all walks of lives. More people are tattooed now than ever. And it's because of social media and the acceptance that that kind of created by putting it in everybody's face, which is good, but there was the outlaws, there was that little bit of the outlaw and rebel side of things in the 90s that's kind of been lost, unfortunately. You know what I mean? So while I get the healing aspect of things, I also feel it's cheapened things. And I don't think people give it enough thought or enough credence or enough originality of their own to really make me go, that's a good tattoo because you wanted it, not because you saw it someplace else.
Let's talk about the inks, the tool that you're using.
So the amazing thing is, with the exception of things being fine-tuned, pigment, inks, the machines themselves, all the other, if anything, I think infectious disease and the spread, or the protection we take against the spread of things has probably grown the most, because tattooers now, everybody is aware of, especially with stuff like COVID happening and we all know the importance of being clean and taking care of one's equipment. So that's grown dramatically because that's medical advancements always continually grow. Machines and pigments and everything else, they've gotten more refined. But in all honesty, when you get right down to the mechanics of machines and pigment and lubricants and soap and whatever, for the most part, it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed since probably since the 20s, in all honesty. Things have gotten more refined. The mechanics have gotten definitely more professional and probably a lot more streamlined. But for the most part, we're using everything we used back in the day, but just done in a better way, made in a better way. Pigments themselves, there's a lot going on right now in France, especially in the EU. There's a big thing going on right now with the safety of pigments, which again have not changed in all these years. But what's changed is the medical advances outside of tattooing, which is dramatically affecting tattooing itself. So now we're dealing with, especially in the EU, you guys are going through some major upheaval with what pigments, what color pigments are safe to use, or what the government is going to allow tattooers to use. And that's an ongoing battle that's happening right now, in all honesty.
Are there any legal aspects that a tattoo artist needs to be aware of, and also the client?
So in the United States, it's gone state by state, and then from that state, it goes city to city. So you can go to a state that is very highly regulated, but you may end up in a city that the health department is very lax. So you may have less regulations in that particular city, while the state itself is very high. So it really depends on what part of the United States you live in. I travel to conventions all over the country, all over the world. As a matter of fact, I'll be going to Rome, Italy in October. So every state, every country, every province has their own regulations. So it really depends on the individual city. But for the most part, and this is something I think a lot of clients need to realize, if you go to a professional tattoo shop, most shops are self-regulated, which means if you go to a professional tattooer, whether it be in an unregulated city or a very regulated city, the tattooers have self-regulated themselves. They know what the right procedures for sterilization, for aftercare, for cleaning up after a tattoo. They know all those procedures. They're going to follow them whether or not the state requires it, as long as you go to a professional tattooer. Because we all know, especially again, today's day and age, a lot of younger generation people, you can go on Amazon, pick up tattoo equipment, go to your friend's house, and that person can tattoo 10 of your friends and do it in the wrong way. Whether or not they can do a good tattoo, doing things properly, especially when it comes to cross-contamination and doing the proper procedures in order to clean, that's a big deal. And most professional tattooers are going to do that whether or not the state requires it. They are going to do what they know needs to be done, which is why, as an individual looking to get tattooed and going to your friend's house because you want to be part of something and you want to be, one of the people that got tattooed by one of your friends, know full well that you should be making sure that they're following, proper infectious disease, precautions.
You created a special machine?
As a tattooer, you spend a time in your career where you build your own equipment. And me personally, I never built a machine from the ground up. I was able to work with engineers and I was able to work with other machine builders. The one I'm talking about is a tattoo artist named Paulo Fernando, who owns a company called Electric Ink out of Brazil. I got invited to go over there and have a conversation and sit down, and I was able to design a tattoo machine, a coil tattoo machine that we eventually called the Brick House. It was my design, the inspiration behind the look of it, the way the machine ran. So every tattooer has a certain way in which he wants his machines to run. And when you get to build your machine from the ground up, you get to decide exactly how the machine runs to your specifications. Nowadays, things have changed because, again, the technologies have changed a little bit. They've gotten a little bit more refined. So now tattooers, I don't think, take the time to know how they want to tattoo. I think now they take the tools that are offered to them and they make it work. They make themselves work with that tool. Where back in the day, we created the tool and we made the tool work for us. And I think that's just an older generation, an older world way of thinking versus a younger generation where now it's like you're given the tool, you make the tool work for you, you work with that tool, and that's it. Where we were given a tool and we said, okay, well, I don't like the speed that it moves. I don't like the needle depth. I like more of a longer stroke, whatever. So I make the machine work for me versus the other way around.
You are also a fine artist.
So when I came into the industry, I was more of a commercial artist. I was doing T-shirt designs, creating jacket designs. So I was more of a commercial artist. But I think anybody who creates art now, as a commercial artist, it's hard not to eventually be considered a fine artist because a lot of the things we create are accepted and enjoyed by a vast majority of people. So while we may not be considered fine artists like a Monet, a Bouguereau, or any of these other classic artists, you can't help but think of modern day commercial artists making that leap to fine art. And I think I would use an example of like a Frank Frazetta, who's a commercial artist, fantasy book illustrator from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, who has broken that barrier from commercial artists to fine artists because so many people are just blown away by his artwork and the popularity of it. It's loved on all spectrums of fans of art. So it's hard to say, well, he's just a commercial artist. I think he's a commercial artist that broke into fine art. So I don't consider myself a fine artist. I look at myself as a commercial artist who's been very fortunate to have a lot of different types of individuals enjoy his art and collect his art.
Your very first tattoo, do you still have it?
Yeah, I have it's on my upper arm here. I don't know if you can, it's, so I have it's Daffy Duck and Porky Pig. So I'm a big Warner Brothers cartoon fan. So my first tattoo was Daffy Duck and Porky Pig as Friar Tuck and Robin Hood. I'm a giant fan of the illustrator named Chuck Jones. He was the artist from it, so that was my very first tattoo, and I still have that. I've only gotten one or two tattoos covered up or removed over the years. For the most part, I can tell you every single tattooer that tattooed me. I can tell you where I was when I got tattooed. I can tell you why I got tattooed. Not every tattoo has deep meaning. A lot of the tattoos are just because I enjoy the artist who did the tattoo. I like the imagery that I got tattooed, or I was just at a point in my life that I wanted to get a tattoo. But the joy of tattooing, you were talking about the healing of tattooing. There's no reason why you have to get tattooed. I mean, you can get tattooed for no other reason than I want a mark on my body. And that's how it was in the beginning. Being a big fella, like I was a very heavyweight, like a big guy my whole life. I still am. But, there's something to be said with making a change on your body. And this isn't healthy. I'm not suggesting this is a healthy way of dealing with it. It's always better to get healthy versus making a physical change to your person. But when you're incapable or you're not at that point where you're doing those changes, to go around and get tattooed and to make a permanent mark, a permanent change on your person, there's nothing better. There's nothing more amazing. There's nothing better than to look in yourself in the mirror and go, oh my God, that's there right now. And it took me 2 hours. It took me 6 hours. It took me 20 hours, however long the tattoo took. But I made that change on me now, and it's there forever. So that's one maybe not super healthy way of the healing aspect of tattooing. But yeah, that's for me back in the day, it was more about just getting a piece and making a permanent change to maybe a body that I wasn't happy with. And it's like putting a new coat of paint on a wall. You know what I mean?
What about your books?
So again, very fortunate. I was an artist before I started tattooing. So I had a ridiculous amount of art. I was constantly creating, constantly drawing, always painting, always doing something. So back in I think it was 96, 97, I don't remember exactly. But a friend of mine owns a tattoo supply company, was getting into publishing. He said, man, you have so much art. Why don't you put together a book? And we looked at everything I had, and we had so much stuff that we created 2 books. One which was tattooing and painting, and the other one which was drawing, sketches, like more of like the beginning concepts of all the art and all the tattooing and all that. So it was 2 different books we published. One was called What's Not to Like, and then the other book was called, I think it was just Sketches by Joe Capobianco. And those books, one of the books is still available. I have a handful of those books. But the What's Not to Like, I mean, I think we sold 9,000 books over the first few years. And since then, I've published, I think, 4 other books over the years. I don't remember, to be honest with you. It's been a while. But I mean, I'm always constantly creating. And to be able to put stuff out in something that artists are going to be able to pick up in 20, 30 years and look at, I mean, that's a big deal, to know that I took part in the history of this business. And I'm nobody in this business. Like I've got a very good name for myself. I'm very fortunate. But I admire artists that are 10, 15, 20 years older than I am, who may not have the same social media presence that they deserve. You know what I mean? And I've been very fortunate to find myself where I am now. And again, I see it changing because I got in the early 90s. Now I'm seeing stuff in 2022 that I'm like, I don't even recognize. I don't recognize art. I don't recognize tattooing. I don't recognize what it takes to make a name for yourself. So much has changed, and I'm just trying to keep on my toes and keep up with these young kids.
You run a gallery and a shop?
Yes. So my shop is in New Haven, Connecticut. I moved here back in the beginning of 2003. Excuse me. We opened here in 2003. August of 2023 will be our 20th anniversary here. February of 2023 will be my 30th year tattooing. So the gallery started because we just wanted a place where we could create, a couple of us could create, and we could bring other tattooers, other artists, lowbrow artists, illustrator artists, people that aren't considered fine artists. You know what I mean? We gave them an opportunity to show their work in a place that looks professional, is big enough to really house their work and make it look amazing. And over the years, we've had some incredible shows. I was able to host artists that I was genuinely I genuinely adored being able to say, please show in my gallery and we will bring people through the door to see your work. So I was very, very fortunate in that aspect. And having that gallery got me invited to shows in overseas, and I've done shows in Italy. I've done shows in London. I've done shows on the West Coast. I mean, because of what I own and what people recognize, we get to trade and invite people to. They come to us, we go to them. It's been tremendous from that perspective.
Tattooing is really ancient art. It's been done in various forms.
Yes.
How do you see it will evolve?
I don't think that tattooing in itself is going to evolve. I think that tattooing, it's always been a social art form. It's been something that anybody can take part in. And I think that there are obviously historical and cultural aspects of tattooing that will never go away. When you look at Maori tattooing, when you look at any kind of tribal, Hawaiian, Polynesian, any one of those types of aspects of tattooing, those are cultural and those are never going to go away. I think those are deeply rooted in history and will never go away. And you can only hope that younger generations of people will continue to keep them alive for what they mean. Where in the United States and in Europe and the UK, I think tattooing is more of a generational, more of a cultural experience as it is than it is like historic. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody goes out to get their little red heart, because their family's got it. I mean, there are people like that, but for the most part, I think it's more of a social thing. It's more about generations, so recently I started tattooing a fella. He's in his early 60s, and he got his first tattoo a year and a half ago. And in that year and a half, he's gotten both of his arms completely done, his chest, his back. Like, he's just going crazy. And there's for no other reason than he just digs the art. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds petty, but sometimes there's nothing more to tattooing than I just want to get a tattoo. I just love what it looks like. I have no reason. I have no cultural reason. None of my friends are tattooed. In my family, my brother's got one tattoo. Nobody else in my immediate family's got tattoos. You know what I mean? Like, I have a handful of younger cousins that are heavily tattooed or medium tattoos. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not like it's a cultural thing for me. It's just, I was the black sheep. I was the only one in my family for decades that had tattoos. Now everybody looks at me as like, it's not a big deal because everybody's got them now. So it's a crazy thing. So a couple of years ago, again, we were talking about the healing aspect of tattooing. I got asked to be part of a thing called Healing Artists for Israel. And a fellow named Craig Dershowitz invited me through another friend of mine, a woman named Nicole East. And they invited a bunch of tattooers from all over the United States to go to Israel and tattoo people that were involved in terrorist attacks. Whether it be the one main attack at the time took place in Tel Aviv, where a gunman literally rode a bicycle with a bag full of guns to a busy city street, stopped, threw the guns down, and just started hosing down the street. And he killed I don't remember the exact number, but he killed a bunch of people, wounded dozens of people. And we went to that area and tattooed a handful of people that were survivors of this terrorist attack. Now, we're in Israel, and not for nothing, tattooing in Israel is kind of frowned upon. In the Jewish faith, it's not looked highly upon. It's looked down upon, as a matter of fact. So the majority of the people we tattooed were younger generation Jews. And it was a great experience, to be able to go to a complete, we went to Jerusalem, which is like this insanely old city. We got to go to the Wailing Wall. And I felt like a total tourist, idiot. Like, I don't belong here. This is such a crazy culture. But it was an incredible experience. And again, to sit down and listen to the people's stories and to hear why they were doing what they were doing in an area that tattooing is really not looked upon as being a thing was pretty impressive, was pretty cool. It brought it back to tattooing meaning a little something more. Like now, when people come into us and ask for a clock with a particular time, and we've done it a million times. And again, I'm not looking to cheapen anybody's shit. Like, if you want that clock with your time and your dates, whatever, I get it. But for us as tattooers, we've done it a million times. So when people come to us with their cell phone to show us the tattoo that they want because somebody else got it and now it relates to them, it cheapens their idea. Because back in the day when people came to us, they say, man, I'm thinking about a clock, but I want this and I want that. Can you make that work? And we'd say yes. And we would do that once, never again. But now everybody, because of social media, everybody sees it. So now everybody goes, I want that clock, because what it meant for that person, it means for me too. So for us as tattooers and artists, and I hate using tattoo artist as a name, as a word, because I'm a tattooer, but it's true. We're tattoo artists, But when people come to us and say, I want this because this is what it means to me, you can't help but say, yeah, dude, it meant that to the other 90 people who have the exact same tattoo. So why don't you put a little bit more thought into what you want? Who are you? Think about it. Step away from this idea that you've seen and that you relate to. I get it. But if you want something original, then give me who you are. Tell me what you like, who you are, what you want, why you're doing this. And I guarantee we are not going to get the same timepiece and clouds and doves and whatever that everybody else has got. You will get something fairly original.
How should we take care of our tattoos? Because we are aging.
Yeah, so that's a thing. That's a big deal. The younger you are when you get tattooed, obviously, the less great your tattoos will look when you get older. I mean, the fact of the matter is, tattoos age. Your skin changes, the tattoo changes with you. When you get your hands and your neck and your fingers tattooed, they're going to age much more rapidly than you will, than the rest of you, like, say, your arms, your legs, your chest. So certain areas are going to change differently. When you're very, very, very young, 17, 18 years old, and you're getting heavily tattooed, your tattoos are not going, unless they're done very, very well from a good person, from a good tattooer, they're going to change dramatically. So I think that's something people should be aware of. Don't get your hands and neck tattooed at 18. Wait until you're older. I was literally in my 40s when I got my hands tattooed. And it wasn't because I was deathly afraid of getting my hands tattooed. It's because if I'd gotten them at 20 years old, my hands wouldn't look nearly as nice as they do now. And I know that sounds silly and it sounds vain, but I need to look at this for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? And you see things age, and you see what happens to them as they progress. And I want my stuff to look as amazing as it can. And again, finding the right tattooer to do a good job is a very, very important thing. And I've been very fortunate. I've been tattooed by some of the best tattooers in our industry. And I've been very fortunate that some of the most visible tattoos on me still look amazing to this day. 30 years later, they still look phenomenal. And that's fantastic. I love that. I absolutely love that. But I think a lot of people need to put more thought into that kind of, into that,
Let's talk about your healing nurse.
The healing nurse. Oh, the artwork for the healing nurse? So that came about because of the healing for Artists for Israel. Like, I have a nurse tattooed on the back of my arm here. Again, it's a Warner Brothers thing. It's not, so it's a goof as far as but the whole idea of a nurse is it's good for what ails you. You know what I mean? It's something, it's like it's a Band-Aid you can put on stuff. And the nurse is just this classic image of a helper, of somebody who's going to offer you aid when you most need it. And that was kind of the reason behind the healing nurse, the artwork behind that. Yeah, that was the whole point. I mean, the nurse is just a classic image, that I absolutely adore.
Is there a message you would like to give to the viewers, or talk about some projects that are going on right now?
I mean, as far as projects, most of what I've got going on now, I mean, like I said, I'm going on 30 years tattooing, and there's not a lot. To me, the business has changed dramatically, and I think I'm not happy with the way it's changed. I've become the old man. or the older man in the business. You know what I mean? I'm not the old man just yet. So it is kind of a bummer to see how dramatically things have changed. I think, if anything, I would like to see clients, I would like to see people that are interested in getting tattooing look into it more, do more research, into the artist, do more research into the ideas, do more research into making connections with the tattooer versus just going out and getting a tattoo. That's always something I've always pushed. Is it's not so much about just, there is something to be said about getting tattooed, but the rapport you build with a tattoo artist is important, and it is important for us as a tattooer. Like, people ask me what my favorite tattoos are, and I honestly can't say that I have a favorite tattoo. What I can say is I have favorite clients. I have clients that have been tattooing for nearly 30 years. I have clients that have been tattooing for a year and a half, 6 months, and I look forward to when that client comes through the doors. Not because I can't wait to do the tattoo, I can't wait to finish the piece we started on them. No, it's because I want to spend time talking and hanging out and reminiscing with that person, which, no matter what kind of artwork you create, in all honesty, the human connection between tattooer and client is 10 times stronger than the art that I'm going to create on that person. For me personally, you know what I mean? I can create the most amazing artwork that I can look at and go, yeah, it's nice, it's cool. You know what I mean? And that person will walk away absolutely adoring it, fucking loving that artwork that I did on them. But for me, it's the rapport. It's if I'm having a miserable time talking to you while I'm tattooing, I am not going to like your tattoo, no matter what. It can be the most amazing tattoo in the world, but if I do not enjoy myself, and what I mean by enjoying myself is literally sitting there and having a conversation. I play music in my room. I don't have a TV. There's no movies. There's a ton of art. There's tons of things to look at. But the idea is that you sit down and you talk. And two people talk the entire time getting tattooed. And that's something I think that most clients lack in their tattoo experience. Because it shouldn't be just about walking away with a piece. It should be the entire experience. You can have the most amazing tattooer in the world. But if you did not enjoy the time you spent in the chair getting that tattooed, who fucking cares? Because realistically, all you got was a piece of art, and nobody cares about it. Because if you can't look at it and say, this was an amazing time, this was an amazing 6 months I spent getting this tattooed. It was painful, it was horrible, it was eye-opening, it was expressive, it was whatever. But if you didn't enjoy the time getting it, whether it be in pain, but your artist talk you through it, doesn't matter. It's just a piece of art. It's the experience. It's everything that matters. When we travel the country and we tattoo all these people, it's not just a matter of connecting and doing a piece. It's a matter of connecting to a different person. There's a reason why I travel the country, travel the world. I want to meet new fucking people. If I don't get to meet if I go to the same state or the same country over and over and over, and I only tattoo the same 6 people, I'm cheating myself because I'm not experiencing the culture, the other individuals of that space. I want to know who else lives here. I want to know how they live their life, whatever. You know what I mean? And that's the most important thing for me. And I think it's one of the most important things for clients that I think a lot of people miss because they're so set on just getting that tattoo. I can't tell you how many times people walk away from a shop and they couldn't tell you who did the tattoo on them. Well, who did the little tattoo on your wrist? Oh, I don't know, some guy in some shop. They can't remember the name of the shop or the guy who left a mark on their body. That's embarrassing. That's absolutely embarrassing. Somebody left a mark on you and you cannot remember his name? That's crazy. And again, shame on the tattooer who didn't leave that impression. You know what I mean? I've been told that I'm very intimidating, that people are turned off because I'm too loud or I'm too boisterous or I speak my opinion to it. I don't fucking care, because the people who are attracted to that and who recognize the experience they had after getting tattooed by me, that's all that matters. And the same thing goes for a client. No, don't get me wrong. If you're over the top and you're a pain in the ass, I don't want to deal with you. I want to give. There's got to be a give and take. I want to enjoy. You have to enjoy. We both have to enjoy. Sometimes people are a little crazy too, but the idea is we both have a good time. and it's not just about the art. It's about the experience, and that's something I think that tattooing, it brings art, it brings experience, it brings a first time, it brings a last time, it brings so much to so many people that I think that it needs to be experienced as a whole, not just one little thing.
You're going to Rome in October, and are you going to present something special or making connections?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't been since COVID, obviously. This will be my first trip overseas in over 2 years. So I think the last time I was in Europe was in Naples back in 2000. I think it was 2018 was the last time I was in Europe. So this will be my first trip, and it's not so much about. I'll have merchandise and I'll have some stuff, but it's more about making that connection again and seeing old friends that I haven't seen like with COVID, Zoom and all these different platforms were tremendous, and I managed to talk to a lot of really good friends overseas and people I haven't seen literally in 5, 10, 15 years. So in all honesty, my intentions on going back to Rome are to go to Europe again for the first time and to basically meet up with friends and pick up some new clients and just experience some new shit. So